Hello, welcome to Thursday Lives. My name's Darryl Powis, and today we're going to take a look at the fretboard. We're going to talk about how to learn the modes on the guitar, which is a pretty big topic. I remember I first learned about modes in high school, and I was first introduced to modes in high school, and I thought I knew what it meant, and then, must be 12 years since I first kind of was introduced to them now, and it's been quite a journey. Periods where I'm like, yeah, I know the modes, and going, oh no, I really didn't understand that first time. So there's lots of layers to the modes, and even if you know them a little bit already, there's a lot that we can dig into here about what they are and what they're not, and also how do you learn them on the guitar, because the guitar is very specific as an instrument compared to other instruments. So we have to do different tools, we have different things that we have to work on, and different things to learn with the guitar, and different challenges to overcome. Namely the fact that it's like a Rubik's Cube. There's millions of notes everywhere, and often we don't know what they're called. So trying to navigate that is a bit of a challenge. But I want to do, how do we learn those modes directly on the guitar so that we can actually play on the guitar, not having to go to a piano, not having to learn on paper, or with dots first. How can we do it on this instrument? So that's what we're going to be working on today. If you're new to my channel, welcome along. Please hit subscribe. I'm very friendly and I do fretboard stuff every week, Thursdays and Saturdays. So what we're going to take a look at first is how most people are introduced to the modes. So when I was first introduced to the modes, it was in a high school music class in A level, which is, if you're not from the UK, or AS level at the time, but you're not from the UK, that is when you're about 17. So in high school, it's the second to last year before you leave high school. So we're taking music and we were looking at the modes, and they were introduced in the format of Miles Davis. He has an album which I'm going to get the name wrong. I think it's Kind of Blue, is what it's called. And in that album, all the songs, like each song's in a different mode. And the way modes were explained to us is that it's like taking your scale, but starting the scale from the next note along. And this is how it's mostly explained to people in the beginning. And it's actually a great explanation from a teacher's point of view. We'll talk about how it's not quite true coming up in a little bit. So if you've heard this before, we'll talk about how it's not quite true in a little bit. But yeah, so an example was given to us. If you're in C major as a scale, the first mode, or the next mode of C major, it's all the same notes, but instead of going C to C, which is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, we can go D to D using those same notes, and we have another mode. So D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and D. That's how it's presented, and that would be the Dorian mode, we were told, and so many people are told. And in fact, I also told people the same thing as a teacher, because it's a very good teaching tool, and it's true, sort of. So we'll talk about how that piece learns first, because this is a foundational piece that I think is important to learn first. Is when you have a scale like the C major scale or any major scale, we consider that in its root position to root as it is as just the major scale. So if we put that on one string, for instance, and I do E major on the first string, I'm looking at it, and I'm going to shout out the frets for you because I know probably it's difficult to see my guitar so easily. If I go root or 0, which is E, second fret, so 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 12, or if we're saying that we've got root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, root. That's with note functions. So that's each note of that scale is a number, like root is note 1, doesn't matter what fret I'm on, wherever I put those, it's root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, root. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I will put in the description below my 5 levels of major scale. This is level 1, really kind of fundamental stuff that you need to know is how to play a single string major scale. Now, the way that modes are explained to begin with is, well, if that's our single string major scale, or sorry, if that's our major scale, and that's what it sounds like going from E to E, well, the second mode of the major scale would be from note 2 of that scale to up above. So in this case, if we're in E, it'd be F sharp to F sharp, playing the notes of E major though. Okay, that would be the second mode. It's using all the same notes of the major scale, but now we're thinking or considering that note 2 is really note number 1. Okay, a little bit complicated. If you're lost at all, that's fine. In fact, what you can do is if you pop questions in the chat if you're along live, then I will answer them with the Q&A at the end, or I'll answer them as I go. And the other thing is, if you're watching this after the fact, pop in questions in the chat and hit subscribe, because I'll use them to make new videos. Okay, so if there's anything you're lost on here, don't worry. People go to university and come out the other end in some places still not knowing how the modes really work. I'm not judging the university because maybe they were focusing on other things on those, but it's true, it's a complicated topic. So we've got mode 1 would just be the major scale. That is mode 1, just to clarify. Mode 2 is note 2 all the way up to the top here of note 2. So in this case, F sharp. Mode 3 would be from note 3. Mode 4 from note 4. Mode 5 from note 5. Oh, that was wrong. Okay, and then note 6 from note 6. And note 6, mode 6, sorry, is actually the natural minor scale, if you're aware. So if you know your single string minor scale, then it's exactly the same scale. And then number 7, and I'm missing frets. If you have a 24 fretted guitar, then you're in luck. So each of those have a name, and I was told by my music teacher when I was a kid that those names for each of them come from Greek tribes. So we name each of them, and you have major scale, which is actually has a group name which is Ionian. You have the Dorian scale, which is number 2. You have the Phrygian scale, which is number 3. You have the Lydian scale, which is number 4. You have the Mixolydian scale, which is number 5. You have the minor scale, which is number 6, or the Aeolian. And you have the Locrian scale, which is number 7. I'm going to put those in a comment afterwards on this, and I'll put them actually in the document that's on the download for this video too, if you want to learn them. And part of it is you should learn those names. They are useful. They become useful. And so the first way to learn the modes is actually just to learn your major scales in 7 positions on the instrument. So in the download that I always put with my videos, you're going to learn the major scales in 7 positions along the instrument, and you're going to learn the names of the mode to go with those scale patterns. Now, we're not really playing the modes yet, but it's a really important step to learning how to play modes. It's very important, and understanding, and actually not just kind of understanding it on paper, because I've taught many people over the years who understand lots of things on paper. They can tell me all about the harmonic minor scale and its chords, but if I ask them to play a minor pentatonic and make it sound good, it's not happening yet. So it's important that your playing keeps up with it. So for the modes, the first thing to do is to be able to play your scale patterns. And I would, for this one, if I go for my 5 levels of major scales, which is, I'll put the download on here, I call that level 4. You learn all of your major scales in 3 notes per string patterns, all the way up the fretboard. And you're going to name each of those shapes. So the first one is just the major scale. Number 2, we call the Dorian. Number 3, we call Phrygian. Number 4, we call the Lydian. Number 5, we call Mixolydian. Number 6, we call the minor scale, or it's called Aeolian. And number 7, we call the Locrian. Or if you're American, you have permission from a British man to say the Locrian scale. And to be fair, most of the time it's on paper when, and I've spoke to English people, we call it Locrian, but I can imagine even English people might call it Locrian, so before I get hate in the comments. So you got a Locrian scale there. Okay, so learning those as names, very good idea. But are we really playing in a mode yet? Well, no. Okay, so what you can do with that is you can play over E major backing tracks and you can think, oh, I'm in the... you start naming them to yourself as if you're in Ionian or in the major scale down here, and then you go, oh, I'm going to play in the Lydian scale. But really, actually the scale shape you're in, the notes you're playing, probably don't have anything to do with determining what mode you're in at all. So I know I've just spent 13 minutes talking about how to learn the modes on the guitar, and now I'm about to tell you, well, you've learned all these shapes, you've done all that practice, and they have no determining factor as to what mode you're in whatsoever. Probably. There is possible. I'm going to present a new theory which dismantles the one we just did, and then at the end I might dismantle this one a little bit more too. But what I've just taught you is how modes are normally taught. You learn the first step. You learn, okay, what's my major scale? Oh, and this for this is a mode, and this for this is a mode. That's exactly what happens. It's a very important piece that you can't skip. So if this is the first time you've ever seen the modes, you don't have to pause the video and be like, no, I'll come back when I've done all the practice. There'll be years. But you can understand that you're going to go through this period of understanding them as scale shapes and practicing this way. And then the next thing that you're going to learn is this, okay? And without further ado, I will tell you what that is. So the next step that you need to be able to do and to really understand what's happening, we need to go back to the major scale and look at something else. Because what determines really what we're hearing and what determines what's happening in a song is very seldom the melody. It's normally the harmony or the chords. And so we haven't talked about chords at all yet. Modes on guitar are almost always presented as this thing that we do as scales. You go, oh yeah, well I'm going to play in the... I'm going to play in the Mixolydian mode, and I did this Mixolydian lick, and that's kind of how we talk about modes on the guitar normally. But really, the secret to modes comes almost entirely from our harmony. Being able to create them and know what mode we're in and what mode we should really be playing in and what we should be highlighting comes from our harmony knowledge. And I might dismantle that in a little bit too. But the harmony is really important. So, if you're familiar with your chords in a major key, and if you're not, that's all cool. I'm going to walk you through them now, but the first step is knowing your single string major scales. Your first time over here, go download the thing. and get started on learning those single string major scales, and then you pack on top of them what's happening with chords. So if we go back to our E major, there's a chord to go with every single note in that key. So if I play a chord off note 1, sounds like this. It's a major chord. If I play a chord off note 2, sounds like a minor chord, because it is. If I play a chord off note 3, sounds like a minor chord. Note 4, major chord. Note 5, major chord. Note 6, oh, that's not the note. Note 6, minor chord. And note 7, diminished chord, mostly avoid. But those are the chords that you end up with. So we've got major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, and diminished. And that order that we hear, those chords being in that order, really define what's going to happen. So let's do some examples. If I'm in major, I can hear that I'm in major because of the chord progression normally, or the notes that are in that main chord. So if I play E major, and then I play chord 4, a major chord, and then chord 5 is another major chord, there's no other key where that's going to sound like that, and it's so it doesn't matter what position I'm in. I mean, I could pretend all I like to think that I'm in B mixolydian here, which would be the 5th shape of E major if I go up the progression. But the reality is, it doesn't matter, because I'm playing notes, I'm playing melodies. So it's always going to sound like E major. Always going to sound like it. Okay. So for me to switch to a new mode, I have to actually rearrange the chords and make a different chord feel like home. So the reason we're in E major there and not B mixolydian, even though a B chord is in there, we had E, A, and B. The reason I'm in E major and not B mixolydian or A Lydian, which would be number 4, is because the E chord is clearly the home chord. If I was to sing, what's the song? Teenage Dirtbag, what a cheat. I may get a copyright strike for that, but who cares? E major is clearly the 1 chord there, or the home chord, because there's nothing else. I don't go, yeah, that's definitely my home chord. I don't go chord 2 is, yeah, that sounds like home, or the ending chord. The chord which sounds like home, if you're going to end the song, is, that really sounds like, oh, cool, it's E. We got it. So that's the determining factor. Where is home? Where is the home chord? And so for me to shift to another mode within E, I have to make something else the home chord. How can we do that? Well, let's take an example. One thing you can do is just not play the E chord. So if I don't play the E chord, probably something else is going to become home. What if I do A and B? And I'm just going to make some static noise for a second. I'm sorry if you were listening in headphones, so that you forget about E major. But if I now play the A and the B back and forth, it's unlikely that E's going to feel like home, because there is no E in this. So one of these two is going to feel like it. So in that one, I think probably which one? I think probably the A is home there if you go for it, and you could argue, oh, it's like A Lydian, but it's definitely not. As I go there, I don't think that's in E. Okay, let's do another example. What if we wanted to put chord 2 as our home? Oh, I see the chat's going. Phrygian like a refrigerator, right? Lol, LOL. Yes, and I see Gottfried. Hey man, how you doing? So chord 2, what if we make chord 2 our home in this case? Well, first thing we do is make sure we omit chord 1, or the E chord in this case, because we want the chord 2 to really be our new chord 1. If that's confusing, it's all good. But we want that to feel like home. That's the real answer. You want your ear to be like, oh yeah, this is our home. Okay, so how can we do that? Well, a way that it often gets done, if you take 2 chords that are either next to each other, in fact, you can just go back, you can just do a static chord. That's the first way to know you're definitely in a mode. You make a static chord, and then in the scale, you would still play in E major. And that's true for the last example too. You still play in E major, except it's not really E major anymore. It's now the mode of that chord that is home. So in this case it would be Dorian. And that's regardless of what position you're in on the fretboard. Where you are on the fretboard doesn't matter. It's all about the sound of where is home. That's the bit that matters. Okay, so if I play E major over this F sharp minor chord, they sound a little bit disconnected. Okay, and it's kind of because I started from an E note. Now, let me do an example where I play that chord and then I start as if I'm playing over this chord. So that sounds more like the melody fits. F sharp sounds like home there to me. But I'm playing the E major scale, really. If you looked at those notes in isolation, you watched what I was doing, you had no context of chords, you go, oh, probably E. If you were to look at a piece of classical music and look at the accidentals, or any piece of music, maybe not classical music, sorry, if you were to take I've got some Tommy Emmanuel over here, just a little flex, show off, but if I look at this key signature, you'd never know, because it doesn't tell you. What tells you is the harmony and what's going on. So you have to listen for it often. You can do it from reading, but you're listening and looking in your ear. So let's do another example. What if we were to go for Mixolydian, so chord 5. Well, the best way to make chord 5 really stand out is to acknowledge not just the triad, that it's a major chord, but also that chord 5, 5s are always dominant. My high school music teacher used to shout at us very loudly from the piano. Chord 5 is always dominant. So in this case, now he didn't just mean in major keys, because we were doing these horrendous Bach harmonizing exercises at the time, and he meant in minor keys too, and so he used to shout and throw books at us. He was actually a wonderful teacher. But yeah, 5s are always dominant. So chord 5, actually playing the extended notes of the chord, whether that's the 7th or what the extended 9th or 11th would be, is a great way to make the mode felt too. So in this case, the feeling of Mixolydian is really the feeling of a dominant 7 chord, okay? trying to make that sound, or that the home of your chord progression, is really, really important, and that's the thing that makes it actually feel like a dominant or a mixolydian chord progression. So if we So the more that you can get yourself into the habit of, okay, what's happening in the harmony determines whether I'm actually playing in a mode or not. And now you can understand how to create modes, how to really play over the modes, which is, you know, how do I first of all start learning them by learning the scales on the guitar, but then in order to create them you have the harmony that goes on, which is the back end. Now, so just to recap, we understand that first step, you need to learn your scales, and you need to kind of white lie to yourself that each of those are a mode. And that's really important because I don't know how else you're going to memorize, unless you just memorize it, that Lydian is number 4, that Phrygian is number 3, that your Locrian or Locrian is number 7. And you're going to learn to use those, and hopefully you're going to learn them with note function. So I'll stick the link in the chat too, so you can get my download for note function as well. You're going to learn them using that note function. You need to make sure you know how the chords look in them and how to make that chord actually the home. And Siri's getting involved right now and trying to make me do automatic payments for things. 1 second. Once you've got those two in place, now the third piece really comes in. So I've told you modes are scales. I've told you they're not scales because they're harmony. And now I'm going to tell you there's something in between. And actually the reality is that you can suggest harmony with scales or with melody. And so they're actually like somewhere in between. So the real step to being able to imply or play modes is to know your arpeggios on the guitar, or be comfortable with finding chord tones so that you can suggest, okay, this melody is, or this scale, this kind of melody is really this mode that I'm hearing. So for example, in that B chord, I can write a melody which you might think of as using scale notes. We tend to think of scales as being used to write melodies, but I'm going to say that, well, it's not quite true. You think about music, and really the problem with learning music is it's a bit like trying to learn about the human body. Everything's happening all at once, intertwined, meshed into each other, and we take out a piece and go practice this. And then you come back, but really you've got pulse and rhythm and all theory and different types of theory, and they're all like locked in together. And so we tend to think of chords and melody as separate, but the reality is that melody can imply chords and can dictate the chords that you play. So to say that chords have to be the defining factor of what determines the mode is not true again. Okay, it's more than just presenting you with non-stop doublethink here. So what we do is we learn how to arpeggiate, or how to imply chords with our melody. And so simple arpeggios, and I don't mean like sweep picking of it, so I don't mean, I'm not talking about simple arpeggios like this. It's 2021, not 1985. What I'm talking about is implying the arpeggio or the chord through your melody. So a really simple example would be if I've got this B major arpeggio, a simple melody would be boring, but I could add the 4 in, which clearly now we're in scale territory. So if I go 1, 3, 1, 3, 4, 5, 5, okay, Right now that sounds like B major. Okay? Because there's no content that suggests that it might be any other mode or any other key. But if I somehow in there end up with a flattened seventh, or a note, in this case an A note, which would be the difference between B major and E major, then this is going to become B mixolydian, which is a mode of E major, because you're going to hear that note. So, okay, so that sound is really outlining that chord. When I play those notes, I hear the B7 chord, and I think you probably do too. Okay. Okay, so that really feels like something that's happening in that key, and so a really important way to then start working is go, okay, well, if I'm over this chord with my melody, how can I outline what the notes are that actually make it sound like we're in mixolydian? So the difference between B major and mixolydian is the seventh. It's a seventh difference. So you start learning, okay, what's the difference between A major and A Lydian? And you look and you go, well, there is a difference. It's a sharp 4. So that's like, I would describe that as the third level, the third way of coming at it. But in order to do that, you're going to have done all the steps that I've said. You'll have learned your chords and keys. You will have, wrong way around. You will have done your scales on the fretboard. You will have learned your chords in keys. And you'll have, during doing that, you should be learning your arpeggios on the guitar at the same time. And then you're going to add in the tasty note. So every mode has at least one tasty note that goes like, this is the note that tells us, woohoo, we're in this mode. So in mixolydian, it's the seventh. It tells us that note. If that note wasn't there, what we'd expect to hear is that A sharp, and well, that sounds like major. And then if we were to go, what's now B Lydian? Well, Lydian is another major mode, is a sharp 4. So what does that sound like? Lydian is clearly not my most comfortable mode, just to assure you that. But yeah, so those are the 3 steps, and that's a lot. That's probably like several years worth of content for you to be working through in one step at a time. But I wanted to give you a broad overview of where you should be looking to start decoding modes on the fretboard and really getting comfortable with them. What some people do is they spend a long time kind of languishing around trying to slap them onto the cage shapes, and that's okay, but you're kind of jumping all the way up to level 3 when you do that. Sorry, of what we just said, all the way to the end of the content, but which is okay. I don't have an issue with caged in any capacity. I know there's drama. There is drama that exists around this concept, but I don't have an issue with it at all. I think I often see with people who have learned with caged to do modes is they are super, super confused about how to play them over the guitar and not just in one place. And they get locked in, they're normally very muddled about how to use them. What I just told you is how you can learn them in a really linear fashion. And if you want help with that, then I would go download the thing in the chat, and you'll get my email address, and you can email me and ask me more questions. You can stick questions in the chat here. I love this stuff. I can talk about it all day long. I can't believe that 36 minutes have gone already. I realise I've just dumped a load of content on you, but I could talk about this for another like 3 hours and answer questions and do anything. So if you have questions, leave them in the chat. I'm going to call it an end for the day today, because I think that's more than enough to fully overwhelm you for the week, probably. But I'm going to see you next time. So my next video is on Saturday. I'm super excited about this video coming out. I normally film my videos like 2 weeks ahead. And so when I do one that I think is really good, I have to wait a week and a half to actually upload it. I think this Saturday's video is great. If you had a good time, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm going to end the session now. Thank you so much to you guys who commented and joined me today. I will see you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.